Welcome to Copenhagen, capital of Denmark, and a place that's most well known for, well, I guess Danish people, but that's not the point. We're here to talk about the Pixel 6. And before we get started, I feel like there's something you and I just know implicitly. No one buys a Pixel for the hardware, right? Let's just get that out of the way. No one buys a Pixel for the hardware. You buy it for the software, you buy it for the Google integration, you buy it for the camera, right? Well, then how do you explain this? There's two kinds of people who buy phones. Well, there's probably lots of kinds of people who buy phones, but one of them likes specifications, and they want specifications above all else. They don't care about the camera, how good it is, as long as it works basically. They don't care about the add-on extra value-add features, as long as it does its job. But they do want all the power in the world, because apparently they want to solve all the computational problems in the entire world on their cell phone. But to that person, at first glance, the Pixel 6 might seem just a little bit boring. I mean, think about it. A 1080p screen, 90Hz display, 8 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of internal storage. None of those really scream flagship, do they? For God's sakes, you can get that kind of specifications on a $300–400 device nowadays. So then, what's the point? Well, if you just scratch the surface just a little bit, you see that screen is bright enough to handle direct sunlight pretty well, and bright enough to handle HDR content also pretty well. And it's all powered by 4600 milliamperes of battery power with 21 watts of wireless charging. And wired charging that I'd rather talk about later on in this video, honestly. Add to that the fact that it has reverse charging, both wireless and wired, so you can charge up your favorite Bluetooth earbuds from your phone itself. And suddenly things are starting to look maybe just a little bit better. And then you've got the cameras. Google's gone and upgraded the cameras to the point where the sensor size is actually a smidge larger than the S21 Ultra, $1,000 flagship. And all of that is powered by Google's first attempt at their very own SoC, a chip that, now I'm not a benchmarks guy, but in my usage certainly feels very, very snap. And I felt no lack of performance whatsoever. But even according to popular benchmarks, goes head to head with the best that Qualcomm has to offer, depending on the workload, of course. I mean, sure, Google has made some compromises. 90 Hz as opposed to 120 Hz definitely doesn't feel as smooth, but I can tell you that it does feel a little bit smoother than 60 Hz. So let me get this straight. We've got a processor that battles it out with the best that Qualcomm has to offer. We've got a camera that battles it out with the best that Samsung has to offer. And we've got the added benefit of Google's own Tensor cores. The one thing that probably very few companies in the world can replicate is Google's level of AI and machine learning, and they've put it in this cell phone. Suddenly that specifications guy, he's sitting up and he's taking notice now. What about the other type of user, the kind of person who does not care about the hardware? All they want is the end product to be a good user experience. Well, it's a bit up and down on this one. See, it comes with Android 12, which in itself has some pretty interesting features and really has a focus towards privacy and security. If that's your thing, then it gives you a lot of control over your privacy. For example, you can tell apps exactly what they can and cannot do, and you can see what they're trying to do, including if they're trying to access your mic and camera. You can see that in your top right-hand corner of your screen, little green indicator there. On top of which, if you want to immediately disable the mic and camera, you can do so in the notifications panel now. These are all good things. But on the other hand, Android 12 also takes away a few things. For example, customization in terms of aesthetics. You get those beautiful pastel colors being adapted to your wallpaper and all that. But what if you didn't want pastel colors? What if you wanted bright, punchy colors to make your device yours? That is the whole selling point of Android after all, ultimate customizability. And to an extent, you can still do that with launchers and whatnot, but out of the box, Android 12 doesn't allow you to do all that. There's a limited amount of customizability at best, and this carries on with the user interface as well. Certain things that we've grown accustomed to in the user interface, such as the notifications bar, they've been changed to make it a little more easily accessible to your thumbs. All the buttons are now bigger, but there's also less buttons there, which means you have to swipe into the notification further to get access to some of those features. On top of which, some functionality has just been taken away. For example, if you're a traveler like me and you want to switch data cards, you'd have to go into settings, go into that SIM card settings and enable data, which will disable the data on the other card, and that's the only way to do it. You can't just do it from the notification swipe. In the same vein, there's a few other issues with the usability of the actual interface. Not huge issues, but definitely small inconveniences. Now, apart from that, the phone does come with a lot of features, but there are a couple of things to keep in mind. Some of those features are not going to work for you if you're outside of the US. For example, call screening or wait times on 1-800 numbers, that's not going to work if you're outside the US. So just bear that in mind. On the other hand, there are a lot of features that do add value to your life. For example, if you're at a bar and you want to know what song that is, you can now have it displayed automatically on your lock screen. It'll just constantly keep listening out for songs and it'll constantly show you what song is playing. If later that evening you went home and you tried to remember that song and you couldn't, you can even look up a history of all the songs that have played in your vicinity. And there's lots of such features. And then there are those features that make use of those tensor cores, like the live translate feature that you've seen all over the internet, or the live captions feature, which is particularly useful if you are, say, hard of hearing. You just click on the volume rocker and press that button over there, and just like that, any media that plays on your phone will be captioned live by the system. Similarly, the recording app works brilliantly provided you select the appropriate language. Remember, if you speak English like me with an Indian accent, you have to select system language as English India for it to work properly. But when you do, it works beautifully. Heck, I even let it run for 18 minutes listening to one of my YouTube videos, and it just made the subtitles for me. It just captioned everything almost perfectly, and I was done. Bear in mind though that after 18 minutes, the phone did get fairly warm. Not to the point where it can actually give you comfort on a cold, gloomy day like this, but warm enough to get your attention. But the main thing is that while you're doing this, live captions, live translate, recording audio and transcribing, all of those things that use the Tensor chip, they happen on device. And what that means is none of your data is going to Google's data centers. It stays on the device and it gets deleted after a while, which ties in with their whole privacy-centric Android 12 theme. And as a bonus, it means you can use all those features even when you have poor data coverage. That's quite useful. So I suppose it's time to talk about that camera. Well, the camera is a little bit of a mixed bag as well. See, photos and videos are handled a little bit differently. In terms of photos, there is a little bit of inconsistency. Most of the time, the images come out really nicely. But some of the times when there's a little less light, you'll notice that on faces, there's a little bit of over-processing and over-correction, and they don't quite look right. It's as if the software hasn't been told that the sensors have been improved. Unfortunately, every time you take a photo, there's a heavy amount of processing. Now, it's not the only issue. When you take a photo, it takes what it thinks is the best photo and then gives it to you. Now, there are two problems with this. One, you don't quite have full control. Like, you can't adjust shutter speed and ISO and things like that. But that's okay. The iPhone does the same thing and it takes great photographs, right? Well, the thing is, the iPhones take great photographs for social media. They're very social media ready photographs. The Google Pixel sometimes does that and sometimes does not. Now, to compensate for that, they do give you a lot of options to post-process. So after the fact, you can adjust so many things. It's just beautiful. You can adjust the highlights, the shadows. Even for photos that are not taken in portrait mode, it gives you the options of adding a portrait light, and it does that all through its AI. It figures out what the subject is and where you would want the light to be, and then you can adjust it yourself. It's great. It's fantastic. But out of the box, not all the photos may be to your liking. That's not to say they're bad photos. They're just not immediately Instagram ready. They're not that warm, high luminance photos that you would expect from, say, an iPhone 13 Pro. But when it comes to darker scenes, night images, this thing works like a beast. It basically makes night into day if you use that astrophotography mode. But even if you don't, somehow it takes gorgeous photos and it processes it to the point where almost all the noise is reduced and you get the sharpest picture possible as long as you hold it reasonably steady. Not even too steady, because it does have that image stabilization built in. As for video, well, you be the judge. This is 4K 30 frames per second on the main sensor. with no added effects, no portrait mode, nothing. This is what the video looks like, and I'm just gonna walk around a little bit so you know what stabilization looks like. It's on a selfie stick. I'm not trying to walk stably, I'm just walking normally. The camera is actually moving around quite a bit. You'll notice it does a very GoPro-esque stabilization where the subject is moving around and the background is kept relatively stable, but nonetheless the effect is, it's a fairly stable, sharp video in my opinion, with nice dynamic range as well. It's able to keep me lit, it's not blowing out too many highlights. Actually, there's nothing much to blow out today. The sky is absolutely grey, so there's not much to show you, unfortunately. I'll tell you what, I'll cut to this. This is shot on a Pixel 6 with the main sensor on the back at 4K 30 frames per second. As you can probably see, there's a fair bit of background blur while I'm in focus. There should be a fair bit of pop in the colors because it does saturate the colors a little bit, I find. But generally speaking, in my experience, the video, it's kind of nice. Now this is me walking. I'm not trying to stabilize it. I'm just walking normally as I would. The camera is actually shaking quite a bit. Tell me what you think. And if you like this kind of content, subscribe. Why not? It's free. Do it. Do it now. There are two big issues though. One, with video in low light, it does seem to have quite a bit of noise. I don't know why that is. I don't know why it can't process the noise out, but that is a little bit of an issue I have found. The other issue is lens flare. Something to do with the glass they use in front perhaps. I don't know what it is, but if you have a direct point of light, a street lamp for example, then you will get lens flares, green little blobs that go around, and sometimes, I really like to slam that door, sometimes this can look very cinematic, but a lot of times this will interfere with both your photo and your video, so that's definitely something they need to improve on and something to watch out for. So I guess the camera is a bit of a mixed bag. By and large, it's pretty good. It just seems to have a few issues that I feel they can solve with software updates. And then the lens flare thing, yeah, I'm not so sure that's going away anytime soon until the next Pixel. Maybe. But we should probably talk about that battery. Okay, I woke up at 6 a.m., took it off the charger, I checked at 6 p.m. That's a whole 12 hours. And it lasted me that whole time. I'm talking serious usage, 3 to 4 hours of YouTube, another 4 hours of just streaming music over to my Bluetooth headset because I was testing the Soundcore Liberty 3 Pro after the firmware update, and then just a few hours of general usage, and it lasted me the whole day. So what Google said about all-day battery was true, but at the end of the day, I was left with about 5% battery, which is really not what you want. When you think 4600 milliampere hours, you think it's going to take you through the evening, probably up to the next day as well. That doesn't happen. And normally, I wouldn't care as long as it's got really fast charging, because they do sell a 30-watt charger on the side. And that makes me think, and I'm sure that makes you think as well, that it can charge at 30 watts, but it can't. And to be fair, Google never made that claim. Now, if you look at what Google actually said, all they assured was 50% charge in 30 minutes, and it does this. The problem is the remaining 50% of the battery takes an extra 1 hour and 15 to 20 minutes just to charge up. So the overall charge time happens to be closer to 2 hours, which is a very, very long time given what some of the competition can do. And according to a recent article, it turns out that it only really charges at 22 watts. This is a little bit of disingenuity from Google's side, a little bit of marketing hodgepodge, and I'm not sure I'm on board with that sort of thing. But the wireless charging is also around 20 watts, which makes me think if the wireless and wired charging are at the same rate, I have a theory. Do you remember a few years back when Apple got into a lot of trouble with people for planned obsolescence? Basically what they did was they would reduce the performance that you would get out of your phone after a couple of years in order to maintain that battery life, to put less of a strain on your battery so you still get that all-day battery which you need. I'm sure it was just a coincidence that it also happened to be the same time they were launching new phones. Nonetheless, they did confess to that, and that was their approach to battery management over time, because for everything that matters, the system on chip, the camera, the size of the battery, all of that competes with phones that are genuinely more expensive, $800 to $1,000 flagship phones. But everywhere it tries to excel, it's held back by the software. That camera with its great sensor, held back by software that thinks it's a smaller sensor. The battery, 4600 milliampere hours, and clearly capable of charging pretty fast, held back by software, for whatever reason Google might claim. And finally, Android 12, as nice as it is, as pretty as it is, actually ends up being kind of limiting in terms of customization, and actually gives up some of those usability features that we've come to know and love in previous Android versions and in other cell phone manufacturers. And that is something completely unexpected because, well, it's exactly the opposite of all the other Pixels. But while that's a bad thing, it's not as bad as you'd think. Because if the hardware was bad, then this would be a write-off. We'd say, oh, the hardware is just not very good. Maybe the software makes up for it. But if it's only the software that's a problem, then at the very least, Google can fix that. And given that this comes with 5 years of software and security updates and a couple of years of Android OS updates, I'd like to believe that Google will make every effort to fix the issues that plague this device. Which brings us to the biggest question of all. Is this device for you? Should you actually buy this? Well, to answer that question, I have to ask you a question. Do you really need to upgrade your phone, and do you absolutely want to jump in to the Pixel ecosystem? Because if that is in fact what you want, then this is the phone I'd recommend over all the other Pixels so far, because up till the Pixel 5, they were good phones and there was a lot going for it, but it was always let down by hardware. This is the first device that actually makes me feel like Google is trying extra hard to get your attention. And despite all the little niggles, despite all the issues that I've pointed out with the software side of things, it's still a very good phone. At the end of the day, it is still plenty usable, and I have no real world issues with actually using this device. Yes, it can be better, absolutely, but the things it does do, it does really, really well. Just earlier today, a colleague of mine said that I had to send off an email based on a piece of paper with some text on it. But he said I couldn't just send the picture because that would be unprofessional. So I took the picture and I immediately copy-pasted everything from that onto the email and sent it in 10 seconds flat. And that was truly impressive. Similarly, while the camera results might be a little inconsistent here and there, if you get the hang of it, you can take amazing photographs and really, really good videos. And then if you're not happy with it, you have that post-processing option where you can do so very many things that are usually available in a lot of phones with third-party software, but now are integrated into the operating system and augmented by that Tensor chipset. And as a tech reviewer, I would never recommend that you buy a promise. Never the promise, always the product that is today. So my recommendation to you would be, if you have to go for this device, I really don't think you're going to regret it. It is genuinely a very good phone, and I have no regrets buying it whatsoever. But if you can wait, then you could do one of two things. One, you could wait for Google to release some updates and see if they fix those features, and then decide for yourself whether you should buy it or not. Or, as I have said in a previous video of mine, 5 reasons not to buy the Pixel 6 at launch. You should never buy the first iteration of any technology because it's more like a proof of concept. This particular proof of concept happens to work quite well. But generally speaking, in the tech market, all evidence points to the second generation of any device being such a giant leap forward in performance that it's usually going to be better bang for buck. So if you can wait for the Pixel 7, I would recommend you wait, because I have a feeling it's going to be so much better. And now, I really need to get something warm because I am freezing out here. Till next time, stay happy, stay peaceful, stay colorful. Namaste. If you're liking this video so far, if this is adding value to you, maybe you want to hit that subscribe button. I mean, it's free, it's right there, it's big red button, shiny red thing, can't miss it. Go on, do it. I'll wait. I'll give you a second. Do it now. Do it!